Coach Tony, Wrestling Podium Performance, and today I'm going to be talking about, does the sport of track and field currently need saving? And this has to do with recent comments made by the great, legendary Michael Johnson. So the underlying current of this entire piece is going to be a rising tide raises all boats. This past year, track legend and four-time Olympic champion, world record holder, former world record holder, and one of the greatest to ever step on the track, the man in the golden spikes, Michael Johnson of the USA, announced the beginning of Grand Slam Track, a new North American-based track league. This is the reason for the video, as I also dive into some of the economics of the sport and what generates the money. While the league should be good news, it has gotten some people's undies in a bit of a knot. And that's for a few reasons. One of the reasons is due to something just in the name of the league, track. The league is focusing purely on track events with no mention or participation for throwing events or the vertical or horizontal jumps. The second reason has to do with some of the controversial comments, and I put that in air quotes because they truly weren't controversial. He said that his reason for starting this league is to help save the sport that he knows, and he knows track. Primarily, he knows sprinting. He doesn't know the field events, and at least he's being honest in stating that from the get-go. Some took this as Johnson's ego speaking and claiming to be a savior of a sport that doesn't need him or his help, and that by not including field events, he is diminishing them. Let's be honest about a few things, and I'll start with my own personal bias. I love the sport of athletics, or as we call it, track and field, and I believe it is extremely undervalued. It is the foundation sport for every other field sport that we know and watch, whether it's soccer, football, basketball, baseball. It is the underlying current to all of those, but it is where we see the absolute pinnacle and zenith of how fast a human can run, jump, and throw. I say it's undervalued because, let's face it, when it isn't an Olympic year, for the most part, very few people give a damn about the sport. The 3 years between the Olympics, which we are entering the first of those 3 years, brings a massive gulf in interest for the sport, which means less TV money, less sponsorship money, less viewership, and overall less coverage. What the sport had going for it from 2008 to 2016 was a megastar in Usain Bolt, who transcended the sport and lifted it to heights never seen before. People simply tuned in, paid big money to see him step on the track because they felt anytime he stepped on the track, they were going to catch lightning in a bottle. Now Netflix is jumping into the arena by piggybacking upon the success of their hugely successful Formula One series, Drive to Survive, with their new series in the sport, Sprint. Now, the name of the series gives something away. It focuses purely on sprinting with nothing for the rest of the sport. Even then, the prime focus is on the Jamaica versus USA rivalry, with little showing those outside of it. You don't see much of the 200-meter Olympic champion Lestile Tobago. You don't see much from the French. You don't see much on Ange Degrasse and the Canadian men's 4x1, who won Olympic gold. And you don't even really see all that much in terms of St. Lucia's Olympic champion in the 100 meter. So these comments are going to be essential going forward in this. The sport does need saving, despite the protestations of some within the sport, and I'm going to dive more into why as we go. But first, we need to know and understand who Michael Johnson, MJ, is and why he is so relevant on this. So Michael Johnson brings 4 decades of experience in the sport as an athlete and broadcast commentator. While these days he is a commentator for the British Broadcast Corporation, the BBC, he primarily speaks on sprint events because that is what he was, a sprinter. He was the 200-meter and 400-meter world record holder. He had the 200-meter world record until 2008 and the 400-meter world record until 2016. He still is currently the second fastest 400-meter and fourth fastest 200-meter sprinter of all time. And his 4x400-meter split of 42.9 seconds is to this day the fastest a human has completed one lap. He even went the better part of a decade without losing a single 400-meter race in the 90s. MJ is universally recognized as one of the sport's greatest of all time and was one of the biggest stars and draws in the 90s. The post-Carl Lewis, Ben Johnson era, where there was a massive shadow over the sport for dubious circumstances. His self-confidence was legendary, to the point he famously wore golden spikes as a statement to say, "I've already won, and there ain't a damn thing you can do about it." What he didn't have at the time was social media, yet he was a star without it. Today, he is also a successful businessman that took his success in track and parlayed that into a future after it, something that is rare amongst athletes in the sport. Today, he also has a training facility in Texas. He started up Grand Slam Track League that has an inaugural season this upcoming year in 2025 with 4 stops over the season: Kingston, Jamaica, Miami, Florida, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Los Angeles, California. So you're looking at primarily the U.S. influence sphere with Jamaica added in, because track and field is their national sport and it's going to have excellent success in Jamaica. One of the other things that this track league is going to do is bring some of the sport's biggest stars into it. Some of the stars that are already signed to Grand Slam track include 400-meter hurdle world record holder and 2-time Olympic gold medalist Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, as well as reigning Olympic champion in the women's 200-meter Gabby Thomas, and British 1500-meter star Josh Kerr. It is set to be more TV friendly, which is one of the reasons it's only going to be hosting track events, and I'll dive into this reason a little later. And because one of the biggest detriments of the sport is some of the stars dodge and duck competing head-to-head with each other, this league is going to focus on bringing them together to man up, grow some cojones, and leave it on the track. And the prize money is nothing to sneeze about at the end either. The winner of each event is going to be given $100,000 cash prize. That's pretty damn good money in the sport, to be honest, for 4 races. Okay, so now we know this now, but why does the sport need saving? The answer is really simple: views and money. At the end of the day, that's the reason. And this is due to an overall lack of interest that I mentioned earlier in the sport, especially in those 3 between Olympic years. The vast majority of all of the money in the sport is generated by the sprint events: 100, 200, 400, 100-meter hurdles for women, 110-meter hurdles for men, 400 meters, and then you got the relay events. That's where almost all the money for the sport gets generated. There's even a World Relays event that happens that brings the best 4x1s, best 4x4s. Sometimes they even throw in a 4x2. Why? It generates interest with those relay events. You have national pride on the line as well, and that brings eyeballs, which brings money. There's always been this field versus track event issue in terms of what is being covered on broadcast, with many in field events always complaining year after year that their event wasn't covered, their attempt wasn't even shown on the broadcast. And at times, their event got 0 coverage whatsoever. Even when you watch on TV, track events are almost always live, while the field event attempts are shown with a delay, unless it is the only thing going on at the time or a world record attempt in a vertical jump is about to take place. Even at the school level, just take a look at what events get the most interest. It's not the distance events, and it's not the jumps, with the exception of steeplechase, because everyone wants to watch somebody fall in the water. Let's be honest, it's funny. But at the end of the day, we are simple creatures. The 100-meter gets the most attention. Everyone wants to see who's the fastest. It's something you see on every schoolyard in every country around the world. But when it comes to the Olympics, this is who's the best on the planet. So that's going to draw in a lot of eyeballs. This session at the Olympics also has the most expensive tickets, sells the most tickets, and this means that you're going to have the best TV ads before and after, because that's going to be the most lucrative for those paying for those ad slots, and it's going to be the most expensive ad slots to purchase. It's also why the athletes in the 100 meter, in the sprints, get the highest sponsorship deals with the big shoe brands: Nike, Adidas, Asics, Puma, New Balance, ON, Under Armour even. Their highest paid athletes are the sprinters in track and field. So as I said, the answer is really simple. Money dictates everything in the sport at the end of the day. Now these days some things have shifted a bit, and that is massively thanks to Instagram and social media in general. Brands now have better access to customers by directly sponsoring posts and paying an athlete with a large following to be one of their athletes. You're watching this on YouTube. I'm sure you've seen many YouTube videos where they say, hey, this video is sponsored by blah, blah, blah brand. That is an example of the direct marketing from a brand to the customer through the athlete. You'll see this on their social media channels. Oh, I take this protein bar, this shake, or this, or oh, this is what I use for recovery, like Normatec. They're being paid a lot of times to push that product. Luxury watchmaker this past Olympic Games in Paris, Richard Mille, for example, sponsors several high-profile athletes, including one of the greatest female sprinters of all time, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, to wear his watch on her right wrist at the start of the 100-meter prelims. He knew, well, the brand knew full well, there's going to be a camera focused right there, so that when she comes out of the blocks and she's here, that camera's going to get a perfect shot of her wrist with that watch at the perfect time. So this is how deep brands can even think. And that watch, just so that you get an idea of the value of that watch, it's roughly a $200,000 US watch that she had on her wrist. That's a house. And she was given that to wear for that purpose. Because, oh, the best athletes in the world wear this. It was a branding opportunity for that. Formula One, a lot of the cars around the halo, you'll see Richard Mille, you'll see Omega, Rolex. These luxury brands are going to sponsor where they're going to be seen the most. So today, other athletes are able to get more brand deals thanks to social media, because it's not strictly going to be dictated by how good you are and your success in your event and in your sport. It's going to come down to other characteristic and intangible traits, like your ability to speak, communicate, the size of your following, which comes down to your charisma, how well you present yourself, and a very simple cardinal reason of the female athletes today are stylish and beautiful. Gone are the days, for the most part, of the stereotypical East German uber-butch female athlete with a 5 o'clock shadow and the jaws of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Today, these women are magazine cover model good looking. If you don't believe me, here's a couple examples. You got Gabby Thomas. She's also a Harvard grad. Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, world record holder. Alicia Schmidt, German athlete, sponsored by Hugo Boss. You got the women of the Great Britain 4x1 team, like Dara Nita, Lancicot, Dina Asher-Smith, who's also the 2019 200-meter world champion. And then in other events, you've also got Fatima Diame of Spain, who's a jumper. Ivana Spanovic, a Serbian world champion from 2023 long jumper. So today, the opportunity for female athletes to be getting sponsorships is much bigger. They've got opportunities in skincare, beauty brand products, jewelry, fashion, and legitimate modeling gigs today. However, even if you add up all of the money all of the women in the sport of track and field made in prize money and sponsorships this year, it's less than what the top 20 highest paid male athletes each made. Sadly, there's not much money in the sport right outside of the top names, and this was an Olympic year. Those 3 years, so 2025, 26, and 27, as we lead into LA 2028, you're going to have a drop-off in funding due to less interest. It's also that track and field is not actually a spectator or TV-friendly sport, if we're being honest. A meet oftentimes is an all-day event. At the highest levels, with only one race, and 8 spectators in the sprints or 15 spectators in a distance event, that meet is still going to take 2 to 3 hours because you can only run one event at a time, even with everybody going at the same time. And at a major competition, it takes multiple days because in between each race, you have 5 minutes. The longer the race, that means the longer that single event is going to take. You're not always going to have the absolute best. There's other things that can happen, from weather delays, like if there's lightning in the area, the meet is stopped, 30-minute delay. So all this stuff adds into it. Field events shoot themselves in the foot a little bit here because each athlete gets 5 minutes between their attempts. So a long jumper gets 3 jumps. All of the horizontal jumps, long jump and triple jump, as well as the throws, they get 3 attempts. If you're in the top 6 to 8 or top 3 in a competition, you might get 3 more attempts. And then your score from your best is what your final score is. Whereas in the vertical jumps, high jump and pole vault, you get to keep competing until you've had 3 consecutive misses, or you simply bow out of the competition. So that means that if somebody's entering at the lowest height and there's no one between them and the next height that could be 20, 30 centimeters higher, well, they can take 15 minutes just to get that first height. And then they can take another 15 minutes. That means that first person can take 30 minutes before you see another person in the competition. This is what causes pole vault at times to take 5 hours to compete if you've only got 1 pit to be able to use. And many venues only have 1 pit to use. So just think about that. If one competitor can take 15 minutes, that's the duration of the men's 5,000 meter that it takes to introduce, run the event, and clear it off the track afterwards. Whereas you've only had 1 person in pole vault compete so far. This makes it very much less spectator and TV friendly. And to be honest, most people don't pay attention to the distance events until the final kilometer or the last lap, while in the vertical jumps, no one's really paying attention until you're down to the last few or you're over a certain height. For women's pole vault, it's usually once you get to about 4 meters 80. For men's pole vault, it's when you start to get close to the 6 meter mark. That's when people start to really pay attention. If Mondo Duplantis is going, people are watching him do pole vault because he's broken the world record, I believe off the top of my head, 9 times so far. I'm sorry if this offends people, but it's the fact of the matter and been shown historically. Go to every track meet. This is one of the huge reasons that Michael Johnson is focused only on track for Grand Slam track. I emphasize track for that reason. It's faster running overall, pun intended. He's bringing money into the sport, something that those who are butthurt are not realizing and will end up also benefiting downstream. Because more eyeballs coming to the sport means more money coming to the sport. More money coming to the sport moves to everybody over time. Yes, the top few people will always take the lion's share. When Usain Bolt was competing, he was taking something like 60% of all the money in the sport. He was also bringing in the vast majority of the revenue just by showing up, doing his To the World, and all of his other charismatic theater that went around with it. He had the personality, he had the performance, and he had the it factor. That means now it's time to talk about the boring stuff. How does the sport make money? Direct event and athlete sponsors. So the direct event sponsors, that's where you see their logos, their company name around a venue, sponsoring an event. Like if you watch some of the US track and field championships, you might see something like the BMW men's 100 meter. There was, I think it was Monsac Relays or an event out in California that it was like the Neutrogena women's 200 meter. So a skincare brand that focuses on women primarily sponsored that event specifically. So that would be your event sponsor. And then you also have government entities like Tourism Ottawa, Government of Canada, Province of Ontario, Government of New York, for example, Tourism Dubai. All of these things can sponsor a competition to help fund it and bring marketing dollars to it, to bring attention to it so that they're hoping to get a bit of a return in economic impact. The venue and the organizers of the competition are hoping to now be cash flow positive because we've got more help bringing more dollars to it. Next comes broadcast rights. So this is where a TV broadcaster or an online streamer pays money to broadcast it. So you're thinking like your ESPN, NBC, Sky Sports, BBC Sports, CBC here in Canada. All of these companies are going to pay a lot of money just to have the rights to them broadcast it. Sometimes a streaming service such as FlowTrack is going to pay to stream a competition that isn't going to be broadcast on TV, or to have extra coverage like Peacock did during the Olympics in the US that isn't broadcast on regular TV that you can then go and stream online and watch what you want to watch. Yes, a lot of times this is going to be hidden behind a paywall, but that's how that broadcaster or streamer is able to actually finance being able to do it and to improve the production value. One of the issues we have in track and field is a lot of the commentary is terrible, which turns people away. I'm going to use CBC as an example. The people we have commentating track and field are probably the most boring and worst in the sport. They've been doing it for too long, they're dated, they're out of touch, and it's just a yak back at this point. Michael Smith, and I can't remember the other guy anymore, got to go. And then in the broadcast booth back in Toronto, they got to get rid of some of the other people in there. Perdita Felicienne was too much of her personal feelings into it. She attacks athletes from time to time. Like, I myself as a Canadian end up tuning into the global broadcast or NBC to hear Addo Bolden, Dwight Stone, Sonia Richards-Ross, Trey Hardy. Why? Because they want to give a better education of the sport. They want to give more insights into what's happening, but they also highlight the athlete that's doing it. If someone completely underperforms, they don't attack them. They're wondering, okay, is something up? Because they know what it's like. The 2023 World Championships in Budapest, Perdita Felicienne attacked one of the members of the Canadian team, basically saying it was unacceptable. I counter that to Perdita with, was it acceptable for you to fall on hurdle 1 in the 2004 Olympic Games final in the 100-meter hurdles and take out the competitor on each side of you? I'll leave that for food for thought. Don't attack the athletes. It diminishes the broadcast production value, which means less people tune in. Less people tuning in means less advertising money. Other ways that you get money into the sport is the athlete sponsors themselves. As I've already hinted at in the previous kind of section was, okay, the big shoe brands, that's the big ones. Other companies, whether supplements, eyewear, jewelry, recovery products, apps, skincare, makeup brands, all these different things are going to be bringing money to the athlete directly. Seldom do they actually sponsor the event or a competition. They oftentimes will directly sponsor an athlete, especially by doing a paid post on Instagram and TikTok are the two biggest ones these days. So for competitions, then you start to look at the gate. Gate is the people paying tickets. So if you've got a 50,000 seat stadium, if you fill it up, your gate is number of seats multiplied by number of tickets. Boom. That's how much you make off of that. And then you also have, a lot of competitions have entry fees. So the athletes themselves have to pay just to compete. Twilight meets here in Canada and in the US have that. Collegiate meets just to run the meet. The organizer requires other colleges and universities to pay an entry fee. That just helps to pay for the cost of doing the sport. Pays to get officials there, pays for renting the venue, pays to a little bit of money into the school's program or scholarship funds. So all of these kind of help out a little bit. And then you get into the final income streams essentially being merchandise sales and concessions as well as parking. So if you're in a large venue and you got limited parking, you can charge for parking. You can charge valet parking. If you're selling alcohol, well, now you're going to be getting money from beverage sales, soda brands, Pepsi, Coca-Cola. They're going to sponsor events, or they're also going to be paying to be the sole kind of brand that you can purchase there. Take a look at a lot of restaurants. You ask for a Coke, they say, is Pepsi okay? In my eyes, no, it's not. But that's what you're going to get in a lot of places. And then a lot of meets also require a marquee event, competition, or athlete. That's going to generate interest to get people in. 2009 in Toronto, there was a meet that was hosted that had Usain Bolt as a marquee athlete. That got a lot of people in Toronto after his success in the 2008 Olympics going to that competition. It also allowed other athletes to get a little bit of attention as well that were Canadian, as well as from other places, to compete. You get to go up against the best to ever do it, why not? So what are the costs involved in the sport? First, the venue. You got to pay for the stadium, the track, so wherever you're hosting the event. This could be a day rate, hourly rate, a day's long rate. You might have to be paying for other fees to do with that event. It can get really expensive really fast depending on what the venue is, the size, and the capacity. As well as that venue might not just be a stadium. If you're hosting a road race like a marathon, 5K, 10K, those events, you're paying now for road detours, permits, security, police, and then other stuff that I'm going to get into as we go here. You're taking a look at promotional materials, programs, hotels for officials. You're working with hotel groups to get bulk discounts on rooms. Next, you got to take a look at equipment purchases or rentals, which leads into, okay, you might need to have insurance for equipment, injury, negligence. If you're going to be having spectators, you might need other insurances. If you've now got the permit for alcohol, you might have to have insurance that covers that. On top of that, you're going to need security at events. It's surprising the number of events that end up having thefts happen because athletes and spectators might want to take a souvenir from the event. And it's really easy at times to slip a promotional material item or a piece of a hurdle into a bag and walk away with it. On top of these expenses, you're going to have to think about travel and accommodation fees for the marquee athletes. You need to bring in food just to be sold if you're going to be selling food. You need merchandise. This has to be purchased in advance. And you don't necessarily have the guarantee that it's all going to be sold at a profit. You might have a loss on these things. And then you run into the cleanup costs, janitorial, waste removal, transportation costs for returning rental items, whether it's tents that you set up in certain areas, fencing for crowd control, rental bleachers, like temporary bleachers you see set up. Then you're going to need to pay the salaries for staffing, as well as the thing I haven't even mentioned yet, prize money. If you're hosting a large event, you're probably going to have prize money. If you're having a marquee athlete, you don't just have to have prize money, now you have to also have appearance fee money. So here's an example. This past September in Zurich, Switzerland, a gimmick event took place the evening before the actual Diamond League meet, which drew a larger online audience than the actual Diamond League meet. And this was a 100-meter race between the men's 400-meter world record holder, 400-meter hurdle world record holder, and the men's pole vault world record holder. So Karsten Warholm of Norway against Mondo Duplantis of Sweden, head-to-head, put on by Red Bull, put on by Puma. It brought more attention, more eyeballs than the meet the next day. For those who don't know the end result, Mondo Duplantis won in 10.37 seconds. So if you think you can run faster than the best pole vaulters in the world, you can't. So these types of things bring more money and interest into the sport. Just think, we don't have to like what Jake Paul does in terms of who he boxes and whatnot. But the people under him on the card benefit because now they get more eyeballs on them. They get more money. Amanda Serrano boxed in the co-main event in the Dallas, Texas card that happened a couple weeks ago. And if it wasn't for Jake Paul, she would not make the money that she made if she was just to headline an event on her own. Because he brings more attention with his clownery and his circus act, but that brings the money to help her out and the others. The fact of the matter is that the majority of track and field athletes at the professional level are broke, with only a few in the top 10 really making money in their events. Last year, many U.S. athletes complained about nationals being held in Eugene, Oregon, at the University of Oregon, again, is the best venue, but they were complaining because the cost for travel to them and their team, which means coach, therapist, massage, chiropractic, and even family members, started to become prohibitively expensive for them to be able to bring their team and perform at their best. Plus, hotels and Airbnbs were surge charging, making it even more expensive and harder to afford. Even during the Olympics, there was a few American athletes who tweeted about being at the Olympic Games, but unable to afford rent back home. They weren't going to be able to pay their rent while they were at the Olympics because they weren't working. So I got to give Flavor Flav credit right here for this. He stepped in on Twitter and he met up, and I guess everything he did was he actually took care of things. There's a few others that were jumping in for it as well. He's even the main sponsor for the U.S. women's water polo team. It's amazing seeing stuff like that, and I want to see more of that. If I was in a position to, I wish I could help like that. But I don't have a couple million to spare yet. So just imagine, you're at the Olympic Games representing your country, and you're worried that you're not going to be able to pay rent. That's the situation for the vast majority of people who compete at the professional level in track and field. So at the end of September, Athlos hosted a women's-only track event with $663,000 in prize money, plus a Tiffany crown for each winner, and a Megan Thee Stallion concert afterwards. It was held in New York City at the Icon Stadium, which has a seating capacity reported at about 5,000, but there was also standing room, and it's rumored that about 75% of the tickets were sold. To pay just the prize money, not all the other expenses, tickets would need to be about $150 US. But with other sponsors and broadcast rights for the event, it allows for more money to come in to help to fund just the prize money and the other expenses. The person behind Athlos' event is Alexis Ohanian, the husband of the greatest female tennis player to live, Serena Williams. So he put his own money and backing behind it, his company's backing behind it, to help put this on. And we don't even know if it was actually profitable when you add in yet the cost for Megan Thee Stallion. I wasn't able to find if she did it kind of as a promotional thing, pro bono. Kudos to her if she did. I don't fault her at all if she wanted to be paid as well, because that is her profession and she should be paid for entertaining, which is what she does. According to all the available info, which was through ChatGPT as well as Google's AI, it's still uncertain if the event was profitable, meaning sustainable, to be done again next year. I hope it can. I hope it was a success. One thing that I was glad to see is that there was attention brought to a women's sporting event, because a lot of times they get, in the sport of track and field, because of its nature of being a lot more co-ed, men will compete and then the women will compete. But a lot of times women don't get the attention that they deserve. Like Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, for example, is one of the greatest female athletes on the planet. Not enough people know her name. Tara Davis-Woodhull, who somewhat sparked a little bit of the controversy with Michael Johnson's statements, is one of the best female long jumpers in the world. She's the Olympic champion right now. She has incredible charisma online. Not enough people know who she is. Now, the largest revenue generators for the sport of track and field, which encompasses a lot more than we think it does, are actually the massive participation events with tens of thousands of people participating. These are your big marathon weekends, like the Boston Marathon, Ottawa Race Weekend, New York City Marathon. These, however, aren't looked at strictly from the revenue and costs of the event itself, but the total economic impact to the city. So I'll use what's known for Ottawa Race Weekend, and this is based from info I got from good old ChatGPT, and it's all 2019 numbers. The cost of the weekend is about $5 million, and the revenues are between 5 to 7 million, which means it can profit $2 million, but it can also just barely break even. But the city doesn't look at just that. the city looks at the total economic impact, which is estimated at about $16 million. So that's added money into parking, hotels, restaurants, buying little trinkets here and there, little snack shops, spending on tourist stuff. That added revenue into the city, as well as additional taxes from things like the hotels and whatnot, is a positive to the city. That's why cities host these big events. Another example is the Boston Marathon, the most prestigious marathon in the world. It costs the city organizers in the city of Boston $15 million to put on, but the revenues are about $60 million. And the economic impact to Boston is $250 million, with a B, dollars. So, seems like it's pretty worth it. The economic impact is something every organizing committee of a large event must present to a city to justify potentially asking for funding, but also for permits in the case of these large street closure things, to get additional funding or to have courses okayed, for having police on station for traffic control, crowd control. Longer duration events like the World Championships can be huge for a city, but not the sport itself. Same with the Olympic Games. Huge for the city, huge for the organizers, not really for the sport itself. Yes, it brings a lot of immediate attention that dissipates very quickly afterwards, especially for those who don't win. So this is one of the big reasons why cities lobby to get massive events, massive performers. Think Rolling Stones, U2, Beyonce, Taylor Swift. The city itself and even governments will lobby to get their concert to their city because that economic impact is huge. Taylor Swift just had a couple days in Toronto, caused some headaches, generated an obscene amount of money for the city of Toronto. You see the same thing in other cities where some of the biggest stars go have something. In the California desert, they have the Coachella concert. Massive for the area. Doesn't really bring in much for people far away, but brings in a lot for the event and for the immediate area. So a massive issue for the sport of athletics is that it just doesn't really generate that much money. The vast majority of meets don't give out prize money. You actually have to pay to compete. You have to pay to get there. You have to pay hotels. So it's only really the big circuit events like the Diamond League and Continental Tour where there's even any prize money. A lot of the prize money meets, you might make $100. Costs you more than that just to get there. So using Athos as an example, or the Karsten versus Mondo race, it shows you that people are willing to watch a track event, but you don't see a jump off. The only time you would have probably seen this was when it was Mike Powell versus Carl Lewis, when they broke the world record back to back. And it was a big deal. But even then, because of the nature of field events, where it's one after the other, it doesn't have the same interest as, oh, all 8 of these people are on the line. You can build up hype, you can get suspense, gun goes, first to the line wins. You don't have to wait for a mark, you just see who gets the line first. So that's where they kind of lack the ability to draw the same attention. One of the things that these athletes are missing the point of is that very few people are coming to actually watch their event in the grand scheme. The stats don't lie on that, and money proves it. The events being held prove that as well. Athos track meet, Grand Slam track. Atlanta in spring usually hosts a track event in, I think it's actually held in like Atlanta Olympic Centennial Park, where they set up a temporary track straightaway. They have a couple events, and that gets quite a bit of attention because they bring in some big names, whether it's bringing in Noah Lyles for some of it. It's usually Adidas puts it on, so a lot of their athletes end up going to it. So say the prize money is $1,000 per event winner, winner takes all, and you've got 5 events. Well, you have to now make $5,000 as an event, as a competition organizer, just to break even on that. That's not even including paying for the venue. So you got to just say make double that to pay for everything. Well, field events aren't really going to draw in enough people to do that. They usually aren't in a spot in a stadium that has a lot of spectator-friendly areas. High jump is usually in a D zone or off in a corner somewhere. The throws, they're just too slow going, and it's a real quick effort and then it's over. That's where having the track events brings the money in to help fund those events as well. Usain Bolt famously had a north of $200,000 US appearance fee. Just for him to show up, you had to give him a $200,000 check. And then you got to factor in, as I said before, field events aren't necessarily going to be spectator and TV friendly because they take so long. Someone can be on the long jump or triple jump runway for 4 minutes and 59 seconds before they start their attempt. And then they get the crowd going. But it builds up and it's over very quickly. And then you got to do the same for the next person. So the event takes a long time. What these athletes are missing is what I said from the start. A rising tide raises all boats. So if MJ can help save track, bring more money into it, and generate more interest, this will downstream bring more into the sport for the field events as well. The sport over the next 3 years needs saving as we go into the 2028 LA Olympics. The NBA just inked a $70 billion US TV deal for 10 years. So that's $7 billion per year just for the NBA TV rights deals in the United States of America. Meanwhile, athletics for most professional competitors, while being global, doesn't even have 1% of this. It's at $60 million per year approximately. So the NBA every year is $7 billion. Track and field for the world is $60 million, less than 1%. These numbers don't include the Olympic Games because that is separate. That gets sold as a package. So athletes should be happy with any and all help that's bringing money into the sport so they can make more money, so they can live better as a professional athlete. They can afford better nutrition and food. They can ensure they're not taking tainted supplements. They can get better treatment. They can afford to pay their coaches. They can afford to relax a little bit as well and not be worried about paying rent at the end of the day. They should also be looking at it to be able to build a war chest for when they retire from the sport. Because let's be honest, most are going to be done by the age of 30, male and female. The sport life of a professional athlete is short. So being able to make as much money in a little time is going to help. If Michael Johnson's bringing in more money into the sport and some trickles down to you, it's going to help you out. Because at the end of the day, prize money in the 2020s has not increased that much since the 1990s. But we all know life is a lot more expensive today than it was 30 years ago. I thank people like Michael Johnson, Alexis, for doing what they are doing. Red Bull, Puma for putting on that gimmick race. Athletics Canada, who hosts every so often a street race. Adidas putting on that event down in Atlanta. Because at the end of the day, these bring more eyeballs and opportunity into the sport. More opportunity and eyeballs in the sport brings more attention. More attention means money follows. We live in an attention economy. That's why I'm making a YouTube video, which remember to like, subscribe, and comment below. Hopefully the next iteration and season of their events can add in some field events. The more eyeballs we get into the sport is only going to be good. The next 3 years are going to be hard. But with people like Michael Johnson, Alexis, and others, the future looks bright for track and field. So to those who were deeply offended by MJ's controversial comments, don't be offended. He spoke the honest truth, something that athletes are a little too close to home with because it's always a sensitive topic. Noah Lyles is questioning the broadcasting of it. Michael Johnson's not done. He has contacts in broadcasting, working with BBC. He knows people at USA Track and Field. He knows people at NBC. He knows people at Flow Track. He's been doing this since before these athletes were born. They're missing that point. Some of them say that, oh, what have you done for the sport since you left it? He's done more for it than you have. You just don't know it. It's like here in Canada, we have Olympic legend, Canadian record holder, Donovan Bailey. A lot of people get on him for not always being involved. But everyone knows that Saturday night in Georgia in 1996 when he set the world record at the time and won the gold medal. Every time there's a track event that's large, Donovan Bailey will actually speak up to promote it because his name is synonymous with the sport of track and field. The same goes with Michael Johnson. The same goes with Usain St. Leo Bolt. The same goes with Daphne Schippers in the Netherlands. The future for the track does need saving, but it is also bright and has the most opportunity that it's ever had in its existence.